Listen, they thought they had you cornered. They whispered behind your back, set the stage, planted the lies, and waited for you to fall. They were so sure of it, so confident that their trap was perfect. But what they didn't understand is this: when you walk in truth, no scheme built in darkness can hold you down for long. And now the very trap they built for you is collapsing under their own feet. One by one, the masks are slipping. One by one, the same energy they sent your way is finding its way back to them. You didn't have to fight dirty. You didn't have to expose them, because truth has a way of rising on its own. And now everyone is watching. The same people who stood together plotting are now turning on each other, falling apart piece by piece. This isn't luck. This is what happens when you stay solid while others move with deception. So stand still, keep your head high, because what you're witnessing right now is not just revenge, it's justice unfolding in real time. Their trap was built on lies, so it was destined to collapse, and that's the part they never saw coming. See, people who operate in deception always believe they're smarter than the truth. They think if they plan enough, whisper enough, manipulate enough, they can bend reality in their favor. They think lies are bricks strong enough to build something permanent. But what they fail to understand is that lies don't create foundations, they create illusions, and illusions don't stand the test of time. They may look solid from a distance, they may even fool a crowd for a moment, but the moment pressure hits, the moment truth starts to breathe, everything begins to crack. What they built against you was never real strength. It was smoke, it was noise, it was a temporary performance held together by fear, ego, and insecurity. They didn't come together because they were powerful. They came together because they were threatened by your authenticity, your presence, your ability to stand without pretending. And instead of rising to your level, they chose to lower themselves into a space where deception felt like power. But deception is heavy. It requires constant maintenance. You have to remember what you said, who you lied to, how you twisted the story, and over time, that weight becomes too much to carry. Meanwhile, you didn't have to carry anything. You didn't have to remember lies because you weren't telling any. You didn't have to wear a mask because you weren't hiding. And that's where the real power was, because while they were busy constructing a fragile trap, you were standing on something solid. You were standing on truth. And truth doesn't need defense the way lies do. Truth doesn't panic. Truth doesn't scramble. It waits, it breathes, and eventually it reveals everything. And that's exactly what's happening now. The same trap they designed so carefully is now turning against them. The same web they spun is now tangling them up. Because when a lie starts to fall apart, it doesn't just collapse quietly, it exposes everything connected to it. One crack leads to another. One inconsistency leads to questions. One moment of truth leads to a chain reaction they can't control. And suddenly, the people who once stood side by side start looking at each other differently. Doubt creeps in, trust disappears, blame starts shifting, and just like that, the unity they once had begins to break. That's the irony of it all. They thought they were building something strong together, but they were actually building something that required constant agreement and dishonesty. And the moment one person slips, the whole thing unravels, because lies need teamwork. But truth stands alone, and now they're facing the consequences of building something that was never meant to last. You see, when you try to trap someone who is aligned with truth, you're not just going against them. You're going against something much bigger than you. You're setting yourself up to be exposed, because truth has a way of defending itself without noise, without chaos, without force. It simply waits for the right moment. And when that moment comes, everything false begins to crumble naturally. And that's why you didn't have to fight back the way they expected you to. You didn't have to go down to their level. You didn't have to prove anything to anyone, because deep down, you knew something they didn't. You knew that anything built on lies cannot survive. You knew that time would do what arguments couldn't. You knew that reality would eventually correct the story they tried to rewrite. Now look at it. The same people who were so confident are now uncertain. The same voices that spoke against you are now quieter. The same group that once looked united is now divided. And it's not because you attacked them. It's because their own actions turned against them. Their own words became evidence. Their own intentions became their downfall. That's the lesson here. You don't need to destroy people who try to destroy you when they're already standing on a weak foundation. You don't need to outplay deception when deception is already self-destructive. All you need to do is stay grounded in who you are. Stay consistent, stay real. Because truth doesn't just protect you, it outlasts everything that was meant to harm you. So when you look at what's happening, don't see it as coincidence, don't see it as luck, see it for what it really is, the natural collapse of something that was never built to stand. Their trap didn't fail because you escaped it. It failed because it was never strong enough to hold anyone in the first place. And now they're the ones caught in it, learning the hard way that lies don't just hurt others, they eventually come back and destroy the ones who created them. You stayed silent while truth did the work, and that silence, that's what confused them the most. They were waiting for you to react, to defend yourself, to argue, to step into the chaos they created. They expected noise. They expected emotion. They expected you to break your composure and play the same game they were playing, but you didn't. You chose something they didn't understand. You chose stillness. And in a world where everyone rushes to speak, to prove, to shout their side, your silence became powerful. See, silence is often mistaken for weakness by people who rely on manipulation. They think if you're not speaking, you must be losing. They think if you're not defending yourself, the lies must be true. But what they don't realize is that silence, when it's rooted in confidence, is not surrender. It's control. It's knowing that you don't need to convince anyone of your truth because truth doesn't need constant validation. It stands on its own whether people see it immediately or not. While they were talking, you were observing. While they were creating stories, you were staying grounded in reality. And that difference matters because when you're constantly speaking from a place of fear or insecurity, you expose yourself without even realizing it. Every lie needs another lie to support it. Every accusation needs more explanation. And the more they talked, the more they revealed, not about you, but about themselves. Your silence gave them space, space to overplay their hand, space to contradict themselves, space to show their true intentions without interruption. And that's the part they didn't calculate. They thought silence meant you had nothing to say, but in reality, it meant you were letting them say everything. You were letting them build their own case against themselves, word by word, action by action. There's a certain strength in not reacting immediately. It takes discipline to hold your ground when people are trying to provoke you. It takes emotional control to resist the urge to defend yourself when you know you're being misunderstood. But that discipline is what separates those who operate in truth from those who operate in chaos. Because chaos feeds on reaction. It grows stronger when you engage with it. And by refusing to feed it, you slowly weaken it. And over time, something interesting starts to happen. People begin to notice the difference. They start to see the contrast between the noise and the silence, between the accusations and the calm, between the desperation and the composure. And that contrast speaks louder than any argument ever could. Because when someone is constantly attacking while the other person remains steady, it raises a question: who really has something to hide? Truth has a rhythm. It doesn't rush, it doesn't panic, it unfolds. And your silence allowed that process to happen naturally. You didn't interrupt it, you didn't try to control it, you trusted it. And that trust is rare. Most people don't have the patience to let truth reveal itself. They feel the need to jump in, to fix the narrative, to force people to see things their way. But you understood something deeper. You understood that forced truth often feels like manipulation, but revealed truth feels undeniable. And now everything is coming to light, not because you expose them, but because they expose themselves. The inconsistencies are visible, the contradictions are clear. The same people who were once so sure of their story are now stumbling over it, and all you had to do was stand still and let it happen. That's the beauty of it. You didn't lose your integrity trying to defend your name. You didn't step out of your character just to prove a point. You didn't trade your peace for temporary validation. Instead, you protected your energy. You protected your mindset. And in doing so, you allowed truth to work in your favor without interference. Now think about that for a moment. While they were exhausting themselves trying to maintain a false image, you were conserving your strength. While they were getting tangled in their own words, you were becoming more grounded. And that shift, subtle at first, has now become undeniable because people are starting to see what's real and what isn't. And the thing about truth is, once it starts to surface, it doesn't stop. It keeps revealing layer by layer until everything false is stripped away. And that's what they're facing now. Not your revenge, not your reaction, but the consequences of their own actions, amplified by the truth they tried to bury. So never underestimate the power of staying silent when you know who you are. Never feel pressured to respond to every lie, every accusation, every attempt to pull you into drama. Because sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. Sometimes the most powerful move is to let people talk themselves into their own downfall. You didn't stay silent because you were weak. You stayed silent because you were wise, because you understood that truth doesn't need your voice to survive. It just needs time. And now that time has come, everything is speaking for itself. The same energy they sent is now returning to them. And this is where everything starts to feel undeniable. Because what's happening right now isn't random, it isn't coincidence, and it definitely isn't luck. It's the natural response of life correcting what was thrown out of balance. Every intention, every word, every action they chose to direct at you carried a certain weight. It carried energy. And energy doesn't just disappear. It moves, it circles, and eventually it finds its way back to the source. When they were plotting, speaking against you, trying to damage your name, they believed they were sending something outward that would only affect you. They didn't think beyond that moment. They didn't consider that the negativity they were creating would have a return path. But that's the thing about life. What you give out doesn't just land on someone else and end there. It leaves a trace, it creates a ripple, and sooner or later that ripple comes back around. At first, it might not have looked like anything was happening. It may have even felt unfair. You might have seen them laughing, moving freely, acting like they got away with it. And in those moments, it's easy to question everything. It's easy to wonder why people who do wrong seem to move without consequences. But what you don't always see is what's building behind the scenes. Because just like truth takes time to reveal itself, consequences take time to arrive. And now, slowly but surely, it's unfolding. The same confusion they tried to create in your life is now showing up in theirs. The same stress they tried to place on your shoulders is now weighing on them. The same doubt they tried to spread about you is now surrounding their own names. And it's not because someone decided to punish them, it's because they set it in motion themselves. Energy is precise. It doesn't forget direction. It doesn't lose track of intention. It responds to what was genuinely sent out, not what was pretended. And that's why this moment feels so real, because deep down, they recognize it. Even if they don't say it out loud, even if they try to ignore it, there's a part of them that knows they're experiencing the reflection of their own actions. And the most powerful part of this is that you didn't have to send anything back. You didn't have to seek revenge. You didn't have to lower yourself to match what they were doing. Because when you respond to negativity with more negativity, you attach yourself to that same cycle. But you didn't do that. You stepped out of it. You chose not to carry what wasn't yours. And by doing that, you allowed everything they created to return to them without interference. Now look at the shift. The roles are changing. The same people who once felt in control are now dealing with situations they can't control. The same confidence they had is starting to shake. The same energy they once directed outward is now pressing inward, forcing them to face what they tried to avoid. And there's no escaping that, because when something comes back to you that you created, it doesn't come as a surprise. It comes as a realization. This is where growth happens for some people and downfall happens for others. Because when faced with the return of their own energy, some will reflect, take responsibility, and change, but others will resist, deny, and continue the same patterns, digging themselves even deeper. And that choice will determine how far this return goes. But for you, this moment is different. This isn't about watching them suffer. This isn't about feeling satisfied by their downfall. This is about understanding a deeper truth, that what is meant for you will always find you, and what is sent against you without truth behind it will never stick. It will always return to where it came from. So as you watch everything unfold, stay grounded. Don't let their returning energy pull you back into something you've already outgrown. Don't let their chaos disturb your peace, because this moment is not just about them facing consequences. It's about you recognizing your own strength. You didn't break. You didn't become what they were. You stayed aligned with something higher, and now life is responding accordingly. Not loudly, not dramatically, but accurately, giving back exactly what was given. And in that, there's a quiet kind of justice that doesn't need to announce itself because everyone can feel it. Their unity was fake, now they're turning on each other, and this is where the illusion completely falls apart. Because what looked like strength from the outside was never real strength to begin with. It was convenience. It was agreement built on a shared agenda, not genuine trust. They didn't come together because they believed in each other. They came together because they thought they could benefit from standing against you. And when a group is formed on that kind of foundation, it doesn't take much for it to start breaking. At the beginning, everything probably seemed coordinated. They moved like a team, spoke like a team, backed each other up like a team, and from the outside, it might have looked intimidating. It might have even made you feel like you were outnumbered. But what you were really looking at wasn't unity. It was alignment in negativity. And negativity has a short lifespan when it's forced to sustain itself over time. Because here's the truth, real unity requires honesty. It requires loyalty. It requires a level of respect that doesn't disappear the moment things get uncomfortable. But what they had wasn't built on any of that. It was built on hidden motives, personal insecurities, and the need to protect their own image. And when everyone in a group is secretly looking out for themselves, it's only a matter of time before cracks begin to show. And now, those cracks are turning into fractures. The same people who once stood side by side are now questioning each other. The same voices that once supported the same story are now starting to contradict it, because maintaining a lie as a group is one of the hardest things to do. It requires perfect coordination, constant communication, and absolute trust that no one will slip. But the moment one person hesitates, the moment one person feels pressure, the entire structure becomes unstable. What you're seeing now is the result of that instability. Doubt is creeping in, blame is shifting, and slowly people are starting to distance themselves, not because they suddenly found the truth, but because they're trying to protect themselves from the fallout. When things were going their way, it was easy to stay united. But now that things are unraveling, everyone is looking for an exit. And this is where their true nature starts to show. Because when a group built on deception begins to collapse, loyalty disappears first. People start pointing fingers. They start exposing details they once kept hidden. They start separating themselves from the very actions they once supported. And in doing so, they reveal something important, that they were never truly together. They were just temporarily aligned. It's almost like watching a chain break link by link. At first, it holds under pressure, but as the tension increases, the weakest points begin to snap. And once one link breaks, the rest follow quickly. That's exactly what's happening here. One person's doubt leads to another person's fear. One person's mistake leads to another person's exposure. And before you know it, the entire group dynamic shifts from unity to survival mode. And the irony in all of this is that the very thing they relied on to bring you down, their numbers, is now working against them. Because the more people involved, the harder it is to control the narrative once it starts falling apart. Too many voices, too many versions of the story, too many chances for the truth to slip through. And now they're dealing with the consequences of something they thought gave them power. Meanwhile, you're standing outside of that chaos. You're not caught in the confusion. You're not part of the blame game. You're not losing sleep over who said what or who turned on who, because you were never part of that unstable structure to begin with. And that's your advantage. While they're busy trying to hold together something that's already breaking, you're grounded in something that doesn't need constant fixing. This moment isn't just about their downfall. It's about exposure. It's about seeing clearly what was hidden behind a false sense of unity. And once you see it for what it is, you realize something powerful. You were never outnumbered in the way you thought. You were just surrounded by noise that looked bigger than it actually was. Now that noise is fading. Now the illusion is gone. And what's left is a group of individuals who can no longer hide behind each other, forced to face the consequences on their own. Because when fake unity falls apart, it doesn't leave anything solid behind. It leaves separation, confusion, and the truth that was always there, waiting to be seen. Your integrity became your protection and your power. And that's the part they could never touch, no matter how hard they tried. Because while they were focused on controlling narratives, twisting stories, and building traps, you were focused on something much deeper. You were focused on staying real. And in a world where people compromise their values just to win temporary battles, choosing integrity is not the easy path, but it is the strongest one. Integrity doesn't make noise. It doesn't try to prove itself every second. It doesn't need validation from a crowd. It simply stands, quiet, steady, unshaken. And that's exactly what made it powerful in your situation. Because while they were moving with intention to harm, you were moving with intention to stay true. And that difference created a kind of protection around you that they couldn't break through. They may have been able to spread words, create confusion, and influence certain opinions for a moment, but they could never change who you actually are. They could never rewrite your character. And over time, that truth becomes visible, because people can only pretend for so long before reality starts to show through. And when it does, integrity shines without effort. What makes integrity so powerful is that it doesn't rely on circumstances. It doesn't change depending on who's watching or what's at stake. It's consistent, and that consistency builds something that lies can never build: trust, real trust. The kind that isn't based on rumors or temporary impressions, but on repeated proof of who you are over time. And once that trust is established, it becomes a shield, because even when people hear something negative, there's a part of them that questions it. There's a part of them that says, that doesn't match what I've seen. That's your protection. Not fighting every accusation, not chasing every rumor, but being so consistent in your truth that lies can't stick. They might land for a moment, they might create confusion for a short time, but they don't stay, because there's nothing in your actions that supports them. And eventually people start to see the gap between what was said about you and who you actually are. And while all of this was happening, something else was growing: your power. Not the loud kind of power that tries to dominate or control, but the quiet kind that comes from self-respect. Because every time you chose not to respond with negativity, every time you chose not to lower yourself, every time you stayed aligned with your values, you were strengthening something inside yourself. You were building discipline. You were building emotional control. You were building clarity. That kind of power doesn't fade. It doesn't depend on other people. It stays with you, no matter where you go or what situation you face next. And that's what makes it so valuable. Because while they were investing their energy into something temporary, manipulation, control, appearance, you were investing in something permanent. Now look at the difference. Their actions are catching up to them. Their words are being questioned. Their unity is falling apart. And you're still standing, not because nothing happened, not because it didn't affect you, but because you didn't let it change who you are. You didn't let it push you into becoming something you're not. And that's where real power lies. Not in winning every argument, not in proving every point, but in maintaining your identity when everything around you is trying to shake it. Because once you lose that, you lose more than any situation could ever take from you. But you didn't lose it, you protected it. And now, that integrity is doing more than just protecting you. It's elevating you. It's separating you from the chaos. It's creating distance between you and everything that was meant to pull you down. Because when you stand firm in who you are, life has a way of aligning things in your favor over time. So understand this clearly. Your integrity was never a weakness. It wasn't something that made you an easy target. It was your foundation, your shield, your strength. And now, as everything unfolds, it's also your proof. Proof that you didn't need to cheat, lie, or manipulate to stand strong. Proof that you didn't need to break others to hold your ground. And in the end, that's what lasts. Not the noise, not the drama, not the temporary victories, but the quiet, unshakable power of knowing you stayed true no matter what came your way.